All right, go.
Okay, hello, this is Preacher Don here today. Just telling a little story about I was in the park yesterday and a woman came up to me and asked if she would go to hell because she had tattoos. And we go through this regularly, the tattoos or drinking or smoking or drugs, so on and so forth. And no, you will not in the Bible. God says no flesh shall be justified by the law. And he says, if you that all your works are filthy as rags. So you can try to be perfect, but Jesus Christ was the only perfect one, it says many times. So that means you're not going to be. And so those are sins that are errors and mistakes that many people make, and but they will not take you to hell. The only one that takes you to hell is unbelief, as we've discussed before. And that's the only unforgivable, unpardonable sin that God will not forgive is unbelief. People bring up murderers, thieves, and so on and so forth. That's not biblical either. You don't go to hell for those things. You don't want to do those things because that's not being a good citizen, and you don't want to get thrown in jail. But for salvation, many of the preachers are always preaching against these things. And when people leave the church, they think they're going to go to hell if they ever did those things, and they don't get forgave, and so on and so forth. And it's a bad way to preach, because you could ask the preacher or the pastor have you ever murdered or raped anybody or robbed a bank? And they're going to say no. But then you say, well, God, you call God a liar because God said, then you have done that. Well, how? Where does he say that? He said if you offended the law in one point, if you committed one sin, you've committed them all. Okay? That's what God says in the Bible. So that means stop harping on that stuff and tell them how to get saved. 1 Peter 3:21, it's a good conscience between you and God about the resurrection, so on and so forth. Call out on the name of the Lord and thou shalt be saved. When you're in stress and trouble, it's a sincereness, and he knows when it's real. I prayed to him for almost 40 years, and I thought I was being serious, but until I really cried out on him, that's when I really got saved and had a major supernatural experience that night. And no, I wasn't doing drugs or drinking or nothing like that. I was just in a room by myself, and I asked God if there was a way I could have all the sins I've ever committed or was committing at that time or would commit in the future. And then I had this little thing go through my heart that I didn't even say out loud. And it was, is there anything wrong with Catholicism that I'm in? And wham, that's when he hit me. He knocked me off my horse. And he showed me so much truth that it's unbelievable what he filled me with. And I had sent the kids to Spain, Italy, France, Germany, all over the place to look at these sites that the Blessed Virgin had supposedly appeared in. And I asked the Lord about that. I said, well, Fatima, I know there's 100,000 people there. It rained for 2 days. The Blessed Virgin predicted a miracle in 3 months before it happened. And people from all over the countries came to be healed, 100,000 people. And the Protestant and Catholic and Jewish and conservative and liberal, all the papers had the same story. You can't get that many people to lie and make up a story that the sun came crashing down and they thought they were going to die, and just before it got really low, then it started to go back up. All their clothes were dried and everything, and many people were healed of their ailments. And I said, Lord, what about that? When I first got saved, I thought I'd be asking who killed Kennedy or something, but no. It was like a kid in a candy store. But I said, what about that? 100,000 people, they all have the same story. And he takes me to Deuteronomy, and it says, if a prophet or prophetess tells you that on a given day in the future a certain thing will happen, he says, if it happens, he said, don't believe it, because it's me, the Lord God Almighty, testing you to see if you love me with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. Wow. So I immediately knew that it did happen. But it wasn't the Blessed Virgin that had the power to do it. It was God, and he was testing people, and that's what he does. He tests and tries. He sends tribulations and sufferings. And if you are saved, he'll send chastisements if you get off track, and so on and so forth. He's very jealous. In fact, it's one of his names literally in the Bible, jealous. He's a jealous God. It's one of his names. And he doesn't mess around. He's not afraid to. We don't want our children to suffer at all and go through and make the same mistakes we have, so on and so forth. But God, he's got guts. He puts us through these things because life is short. It's like a vapor, he says. It's very short. And so we need his assistance in trying to come to him with a true saving faith and belief. And he uses trauma to do that, to bring people, to humble them. He says he resists the proud and he only gives to the humble. So it's very hard to humble yourself to that level. So he will do it. He won't go over a certain level. He's not going to push you off a cliff, but he gives you what he knows you can handle. And if you still reject it to the end, you'll go to hell if you die in unbelief. You have to get right with him. He's the one that makes you righteous. You don't become righteous by going to church and giving money, helping the neighbor and the old lady across the street. I do that stuff, but I don't go to church and give money. No, because God says, you cannot worship me in buildings in the Bible, so on and so forth. But I will help an old lady across the street and help a friend or whatever. This is fine, but it's not for salvation. Don't get them mixed up. Don't mix up faith and the works. And so faith without works is dead. As faith is a saved person without working, quote, giving the gospel to a unsaved person, it's dead to them. It's no good if you just keep it to yourself. That's why he says it's wise to soul win. And it pleases him to save men through the foolishness of preaching. And also it pleases him to save men through going to buildings and giving a lot of their money away. No, he doesn't say that. And study to show yourself approved is another one that he says you should do after you're saved. So these are all good tips for that. But life is not going to be completely joyous for anybody, whether you're the richest guy in the world or the poorest guy in the world. You're going to have problems and you're going to suffer, and it depends on what you do with that. If you blame God, or you say you don't believe in him and it just happened on its own, or you confront him about it and talk to him about it and ask him for help. And these are how you get close to God and have a good conscience with him. So when you get in front of him, he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. He doesn't say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. That's what you don't want to hear. So that's all for today. Peace and grace. Preacher Don out.